Welcome to the High School Hamster Wheel Podcast. Are you tired of watching the teenagers in your life trying desperately to keep up on the high school hamster wheel? Is your teen confused about which direction to take after high school graduation? Our world is changing, and our kids need to know all of the options available after high school so they can feel empowered to make the choice that is best for them. Through interviews with industry experts and leaders in education, we will explore the latest trends that are shaping the opportunities of today and tomorrow. I'm your host, Betsy Jewell, and I can't wait to take this journey with you. Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of the High School Hamster Wheel Podcast. I'm thrilled to introduce today's guest. Her name is Kristin Allaben, and she is the Chief Operating Officer and a coach at her company called The Forte Factor. There's so much good stuff in this episode. I'm going to let Kristin do a little intro of herself, and then we'll get to the good stuff. So, hi, Kristin. Thanks for being here.
Hi. Thank you so much for having me.
Wow. So, Kristin and I connected through a group online, which isn't that how everybody meets everybody these days? And Kristin has a really interesting background and story. So, Kristin, why don't you tell us a little bit about your journey?
Sure. So I graduated from Bentley in Waltham back in 2008. I say Bentley and not Bentley University because it was just Bentley when I was there for the 4 years that I was there. And after I graduated, I majored in information design and corporate communication, minored in psychology. So I moved into the field of PR. And I loved what I did. It was fast-paced. It was always on your toes, thinking critically, thinking strategically, thinking creatively. After about 10 years in the industry, I started to question if that was really the right fit for me. I had a couple of interesting run-ins with bosses. I had a couple of interesting job descriptions that, I was hired to do one thing, but the actual job was something very, very different. And I started to question if PR was actually the right thing for me. I actually took the talent assessment that you'll find on the Forte Factor's website, and it helped me redefine what exactly it is that I'm good at and what I would be happy doing. And it led me down a road that I probably never would have considered into patient advocacy. And I did that for about a year or so and realized that the company I was working for didn't have any internal PR or marketing strategy. So I marched into the HR's office and suggested we create a department, and then I moved into the PR and marketing in that world. So it was a very different type of PR than I had been doing. Previously, I'd been in IT security and business technology, and then I was shifting into patient care and healthcare. So two drastically different worlds, despite the intersection of technology across both. And after a couple of years, actually the Forte Factor is a company that is owned and in partnership with me and my dad. My maiden name is Forte, F-O-R-T-E, and the Forte Factor came from our last name, but also to ask, what is your forte? What are you innately good at? Yeah, so we launched that company together a couple of years ago, and then I joined full-time this past January.
Fantastic. How is that being in business with your dad?
It is so cool. I know a lot of people say, don't work with family. There are horror stories, but I think my dad and I are both coaches, and we're really passionate about what we guide our clients in doing and what we are trying to share with the world. So I think, I think our biggest challenge is that we have too many ideas and we can't seem to focus on one.
Yep.
But
entrepreneurial brains do that. Yeah.
It really is. And it's funny. My dad is the true entrepreneur between the two of us. And, I'm the COO for a reason. I'm the one that's supposed to be reining him in. And there are some times we'll find ourselves in meetings and he brings up an idea and then we start spitballing and then we have a strategy and we look at each other and say, this isn't what we meant to talk about at all today. Right. Do we still want to move down this road? But
that's great.
But yeah, it's great.
Yeah, that's great. And I don't know. I don't think I've ever talked to anybody, certainly not on this podcast, but most people in life, nobody's got a straight path from here to there. Everybody swerves. Everybody's career takes, dips in the road and unexpected turns. And the cool thing about that is I think we all end up where we're meant to be. But you never really know when you're on that road where you're really going to end up. So that's a really neat story.
Well said. Well said. And actually, my dad followed a similar path. He was actually a CPA and VP of Finance, I believe. And then he decided he was going to head up a corporate coaching program within this company that he worked at. And he did that for I think it was five years, maybe 10 years. And he said, I want to do this all the time, and branched off on his own. So he did the same thing. I mean, he went from numbers to coaching.
Right.
And granted, now he runs the business side of our business. So he does business and corporate coaching, whereas I focus on more life and other avenues. But he has this incredible CPA financial background that's able to really help a lot of businesses get refocused on what they need to do in their business to grow, to be strategic thinkers, to hire the right people. So we have a really unique footing in that regard.
Yeah, it sounds like you both of your skills complement each other. So
exactly, yeah.
Let's talk about the work that you do, life coaching, and let's talk about how that applies in families, parents and kids, and in particular, kids who are contemplating, what am I going to do with the rest of my life?
Yeah, I mean, it's a big question. I think a lot of adults can, we joke, well, we don't really know what we want to do when we grow up. And I think it's because for some reason, it starts when you're little. You ask a preschooler or a kindergartner, what do you want to be when you grow up? And it's a cutesy answer, a fireman. I want to be an astronaut. I want to be a princess, and it's cute and it's fun. And you ask them because it's adorable, and their answers change all the time. But I think that's something we can learn from them. Their answers change all the time. It's based on what they're finding out about themselves, what they're discovering that they really like or love to do. I have 3 little boys, and my oldest is 3. And he's in this phase right now where he is just enthralled with fighter jets, but not all the time. Sometimes it's fire trucks, and sometimes it's monster trucks. And when you ask him what his favorite thing is, the only consistent answer we get is that his favorite color is red. Everything changes. But it's a really great learning experience for my husband and I in particular, because he is not committing to any guidelines that he's being given.
Right.
He is living uniquely himself. And his brothers are going to do the same when they get to that age.
Right. And that's a great point, because I think as parents, we I don't want to say force, but we guide or nudge, a very strong nudge, our kids into these zones or these paths and say, oh, well, don't you want to be this? Don't you want to be an engineer? Don't you want to be a doctor? Don't you want to go to college? Like all those questions where and I can only really speak for myself and some people that I know, and say, it took me a while to get to a point where I said, what do you want to do? Not just like, what do you want your job to be, but what do you want your life to look like? What do you want that experience to be like for you? And oh, by the way, you don't have to commit for the rest of your life. It doesn't have to be, well, for the next 30 years, you're stuck doing this. But where do you see yourself? What are your interests? And I think that's where the book that you wrote, The Greatness Zone, I think is a great opportunity for people to help teens find where their greatness zone is, right? How to find their way to a great life.
Yeah, exactly. So, before we get into the greatness zone, I think a good starting point for anyone, but especially for teens who are considering what's coming next after high school, is what makes me happy? How do you define happy? To you, not your parents, not your friends, not your teachers or your coaches. What makes you happy? And you'd be surprised how that exercise is really challenging, because people tend to get stuck on the surface level happy.
Right. Well,
today it's raining, so I guess I'm happy that I'm inside. Well, that's great, but what is at your core? What makes you happiest? Right. And then in the same vein, what is successful to you? Not to somebody else, because they're not living that life. It's your life. So what is successful to you?
Right.
And that is a value. Values change over time. So when I was in high school, my success to me was getting into a good college that had a major I enjoyed.
Right.
And for me, that was success. But then I got to college and I thought, what is success for me? is getting a job after college. Not even a good paying job. It was just getting a job. I mean, the market crashed in 2008. I was one of the lucky few who didn't get the layoff note. So it was, that was success to me. I still have a job.
Mm-hmm.
And your values change over time as you start to have a family, as you move, as your life situation changes. So that's an important exercise to start with, is what is happy to you and how do you define success? And from there, you can start to understand your talents and your strengths, your values, your passions, and then understand where your greatness zone is.
Okay, so do you have any tips for teens and for their parents to actually answer those questions? Because you said yourself, they're hard questions, right? What is happy and how do you define success? When you're 16, 17 years old or even younger, it's hard to, for my 15-year-old, happy is, on the Xbox with his friends eating Reese's peanut butter cups, right? So,
right.
But
uninterrupted.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So how do you get them thinking bigger than that or broader?
Thinking more critically than that. Yeah. So I think for parents, it's being comfortable with the silence. I find that a lot of parents, the gentle nudges that we kind of alluded to before, is we start to put words in their mouth because we want them to answer. But I'm finding that a lot of teens in particular are more innately aware of who they are because of social media, for better or for worse. They are more likely to hide who they are because of social media, which means that they know who they are.
Right.
So challenging them in a productive and safe way to say, what makes you happy? It gets the thought going. And then, continuing the conversation is changing the word. Maybe not what makes you happy, but what's something you really love to do that we haven't done in a while, or that you haven't done in a while? Or is there something that you wish we had more time to do today?
Right.
Or this weekend? Is there something that you haven't had the opportunity to try yet that you would like to?
Those are great.
Starting
questions.
to get them think. Yeah. So starting to get them to think, outside of traditional happy. It's, this is your one life that you get to live. So do something that makes you feel good.
Right. And it's, to your point, social media is a blessing and a curse, right? I love it because it connects me to friends and family far and wide, but our kids are seeing, every move their friends make, and it's a lot of, fear of missing out and what's everybody else doing, and am I going to fit in and be accepted? And I think that's a big struggle for high schoolers as well. It's, well, my friends are all going to college, or my friends are all going to college X, so therefore I should be going there. Is that the right move for me? I have no idea. I haven't even thought that far, but I know my friends are doing it, so I should be doing it. Do you have any tips about how to help kids kind of stay their own lane, like stay their own course is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, that's a great question. So I think it ultimately comes down to those two definitions. What is happy to you and how do you define success? Because your friends might all be going to the same 4-year institution, but is that something that you want ultimately for you and for your life? Not necessarily the friend environment or that atmosphere of that institution, but what are you going to get out of it?
Right.
Is it worth the money? I mean, not even the investment. Just ask yourself, is it worth the money? And if it is, fantastic. That is a huge awareness moment that you've identified, not only that a 4-year institution is the right fit for you, but also that you've identified a specific college or university where they offer something that you are interested in studying. But, there are other options as well. And I think it's kind of a two-pronged approach that I think we find ourselves facing here, is that high schools, regardless of whether they're vocational or public or private, guidance counselors are so in this, this trained mindset to funnel everyone toward a 4-year institution. You get good grades, you go to college, find a good one. Right. Take your SATs, take your ACTs, study for them, do really well. They have a big impact on your application. But the reality is, everybody knows at this point, not everybody tests well. People test differently. So to that point, there are so many options outside of a 4-year institution that I think a lot of people glaze over. Whether it's a 2-year degree, a 4-year degree, trade school, gap year, going right to work, working part-time and going to school part-time. There are so many options that are very rarely brought to the table, that I think a lot of kids start to say, well, I guess I have to go to college because that's what my parents want me to do, and I'll just figure it out from there.
Hence, by the way, thank you for the big plug for this podcast, because that's what it's all about. Thanks. I couldn't have scripted that better. Great advice. Really good, a different approach to thinking about it. And, I think as parents too, we're guilty of asking a lot of yes or no questions, right? How was or one word answers they can give us. So how was your day at school? Good. Well, I asked for that, right? So it's kind of the same thing. Like, what makes you happy, or what do you want to spend more time doing? That really, really triggers a conversation more than a one-word answer. So I really like that.
Yeah, and so that's the one step of the two-pronged approach, is that high schools cannot just continue this one direction mindset. And the second prong here is the parents and the students themselves. There's a lot of self-discovery work that goes into finding the right fit. And like we've talked about, there's no one right answer. You can try something and say, oh, geez, this is not what I thought it was going to be. And that's fine. That's part of your discovery. That's understanding that maybe you really love doing volunteer work, but you're realistic that you can't make a career out of it. So now you find something else that ties into volunteering. Maybe you work for a nonprofit.
Right.
Maybe you do more volunteer activities outside of work than you probably would have otherwise, because that's something that's of particular passion or value to you. But it's this, like I keep saying, it's a two-pronged approach. There has to be a mindset shift in the high school administration, that it's not just a one size fits all, and there is work that has to be done at home from both the students and guided from the parents.
Exactly. I say this all the time. I believe we need to stop asking our kids if they want to go to college and start asking them, first, what do you want to do? And two, why do you want to do it? Because if they can't tell you why, I don't think they've given it enough critical thought.
Yep.
Great.
Yep, I completely agree. And it's hard for an 18-year-old to say, this is absolutely what I'm going to do. Me personally, I can think back to when I was in preschool, I drew a picture for my mom and said I wanted to be a baby doctor. And I didn't mean a pediatrician. I meant I actually wanted to deliver babies. And I don't know where I would have gotten that from at the age of 5, but that was something I was committed to being until a freshman in high school. And then I said, you know what? I think I've changed my mind. I think I want to work in the ER.
Wow.
And then from there, I took an AP English class and realized, oh my God, I love to write.
Mm-hmm.
And then I was like, well, maybe I can write for healthcare or medical journals instead. And then that transformed into, if I'm going to do that, I need to know what I'm talking about. Oh my God, let me discover PR.
Wow.
And it was this really cool learning journey that got me to there, because I tried new things.
Exactly. Like, you hit that on the head. Like, if you had not had that English class and it had not triggered that I love writing in you, you might have not never known that, but it might have taken you longer to figure that out.
Yep, exactly. And though I loved Bentley, don't get me wrong, there are days where I wonder, if I had gone somewhere else to get the general education requirements out of the way, would I have even gotten more out of my college career? Because every college has the gen ed requirements, and it's important to take them. Sure, absolutely. But the real reason that you're going to a university is to study something that you are passionate and dedicated and interested in. And, I'm going to be first one to raise my hand here and say, oh my God, if you make me take another algebra or geometry class, I'm done. Like, I just don't want it anymore. I am a word person. And I didn't realize how much I loved public speaking until I took a public speaking class. And I didn't realize how creative writing could actually inspire more productive business writing. So it was all of this really cool, unique opportunities that my college offered that I only was able to take because I did my research.
Right. That's a great point. I think I just read an article that the Princeton Review came out with their college rankings, and they spoke to students about what the best things were about the colleges they went to. And very little of the responses were about the programs offered or the majors offered at the schools. It was campus life, all the things that are important about college life. But if you'd asked, I wonder what would happen if you had asked those kids, well, what about the courses that you're in and the curriculum that you have? Are you loving that too? It was just an interesting
And that's
article.
a really good point too. I actually was just reading an older article from Harvard Business Review about are higher education degrees even worth it anymore? Because with the market crash, everyone went to school for multiple degrees because there were no jobs. And they figured if I go and get multiple degrees, I'm going to set myself apart from the competition. Ironically, they made the competition harder. And I think a lot of people forget that. Is the degree something that you're really going to use? Is it something that you're going to leave college and say, yep, this made a huge difference. This helped me with my connections. It helped build a network. For someone who wants to be a lawyer or a doctor, I think we've talked about that before, Betsy, a lawyer or a doctor or something where advanced training is required to do that job. Absolutely. That's something you need to commit to. But for someone else, I loved the environment and the programs that I got. But I always wonder, would I have been able to get the same level of education in public speaking and writing if I had gone to another different institution? And I mention that specifically because Bentley is really known as the financial school. And I did not major in finance at all. I went there from the business side of things. So I got a basic understanding of the business side, but focused on the writing and the communication.
Right. Yeah, I just read a statistic not too long ago that, 70% of high school grads go to college and only about 30% actually finish with a degree, and about half of them use their degree in the field that they work in. So even for those that are graduating, they're not necessarily using the degree that they earned. Now, there's lots of discussion going on, and rightfully so, about there's other value associated with going to college, not just about using the degree that you get. But that said, I think that's even more fuel to say, think hard about what you want to study. If you're going to spend 4 years of your life and a lot of money, make it worth it. Learn something that you're really interested in, not that you think is the best thing to make money or what your parents think you should do or what all your friends are doing, right?
Exactly. And, this all comes back to the greatness zone too. So the greatness zone, if you think about it like a Venn diagram with 3 circles, on one circle are your talents, on one circle are your strengths, and in one circle are your passions or things that matter to you. Where each of those intersect in the middle, that's your greatness zone. That is where you pull in your talents, your strengths, and your values, your passions. That is where you will be happiest because everything that matters the most to you, everything that you are just inherently good at, it all just comes together. It clicks there. And then once you figure that out about yourself, then you can look to the rest of the world and say, where does the world need this? And there's a great quote that I'm not going to be able to deliver because it's kind of a convoluted quote, but I believe it's from Buckminster Fuller. He was an architect and kind of a visionary of the 20th century. And he said, what is it on this planet that needs doing that would not be done if it wasn't for you? And I'll have to get you the exact quote because that's basically a high level summary. But it basically challenges you to say, what am I here? What am I uniquely good at? What am I here for that I can bring to my world that no one else could do?
Oh, I love that.
Because I have a unique, I have this unique vision. I have this unique mindset. It's not the same as my best friend or my parents. And there's a reason for that because you are a unique person. You are yourself. And every life experience that you've had up to this point has made you who you are. So what is it in this world that needs fixing that you know how to do that nobody else could do?
Oh, that's genius. Thank you for that. Please send me that quote. I say to my teenagers all the time, use your power for good. Whatever you end up, and they're good at lots of things, but whatever you end up being really, really good at in your life, apply that in a way that makes the world a better place. And I love
That's beautifully said.
I love that quote. So thanks for sharing it. Okay. So we're going to start to wrap up. We could talk all day. I love this topic. I'll have you back. So kind of a looking back, if you could give your teenage self one piece of advice, knowing now or knowing then what you know now, what would you say?
I think I would tell myself, make a decision for you. And I say that because there were a couple of people who told me you really should get a master's degree. And I remember thinking, you're right, it probably makes sense. But in my line of work, a master's degree was never needed. It was just an extra piece of paper, at least in the direction that I was pursuing the master's degree. So I took a few master's classes through a fifth-year program and really didn't like it. So at the end of it, I said, you know what, I don't think this is the right thing. And I dropped it, which for me, I'm a firstborn type A person. Quitting is not in my nature. So for me to actually have the self-awareness to say, this is not going to be worth it in the long run, stop now while you're ahead was a big deal.
That's huge.
But then, I still continued to get pressure. Well, you really should have a master's. And I started to look into other programs and started to do a master's program specific to PR and grassroots political efforts. Politics is really not my thing, but I figured I'll give it a try. You never know if I'm going to need it. And remember, this is back in 2008, 2009. There was a lot going on in politics right then. So I figured I'll give it a try and I'll see what's happening. And, after one semester and an asinine amount of loans that I had to take out again, it was just another light bulb moment where I thought, this is not what I want. This is not what I need for where I want to go in my life. I don't want to come home and do homework after working a 12-hour day. This isn't for me. So long-winded way of saying, I wish I had stuck to my gut. When my gut said, you really don't need this, this isn't even worth trying because it's not the right fit for you.
Right.
I wish I had listened to my gut.
Yeah, that's great advice. I think, again, teens especially, they're so driven by what everyone thinks, right? What everyone's perception is of them. So it's hard sometimes to listen to that inner voice. And I think that throughout our life, right? We doubt ourselves. The self-doubt creeps in all the time. But the more you can stand on your 2 feet and say, this is who I am, and this is what I believe, and this is what's right for me, I believe that's life-changing.
Absolutely. I actually have a quote over my office desk, my desk in my office, I should say, that is from E.E. Cummings. And it says, it takes courage to grow up and become who you really are. And I think that is so true for any person at any age. I mean, there are moments I say new mom. I have a 3-year-old, an almost 2-year-old, and a newborn. And I'm still trying to figure out navigating that new mom life. But there are very vivid memories of me standing up for things in high school that I think back and think, oh my God, why on earth did I do that? Or why wasn't I stronger when I did that? And things in college where I think, all right, like I just gave the example about the master's degree. I knew it wasn't the right fit for me. It wasn't the right direction for me to go in because I had a great start and a great career. And I just listened to other people.
Mm-hmm. Guilty. Been there, done that.
Yeah.
Okay, so where can people find you online? Where would you like them to find you online?
Great. So the Forte Factor, we are at thefortefactor.com, FORTEFACTOR.com with the in front of it. We're on Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter. You can also find me on LinkedIn, Facebook, and Twitter. My full name, Kristin Allaben. It's Kristin, and the last name Allaben. We are, the Forte Factor from a really high level. I mentioned at the start of the podcast here that, our motto is what's your forte, and helping you really figure out where your strengths and your passions are. But our tagline is to help you discover, develop, and live your strengths.
Oh, nice. I like that. I'm going to put all those links and all those places to find you in the show notes. So People
Great.
can visit my site and find all that information. Kristin, thank you so much. This has been such a great conversation. I really appreciate it. I know you're busy with a lot of boys at home. So thanks for making time for us today.
Thank you. I appreciate it. And to anyone who's considering the next step, we do also offer a very unique program for juniors and seniors in high school called the College Camp. And it's a 5-session program, whether it's 5 weeks in a row or 10 weeks in a row. You can actually work through a lot of these questions with a coach.
Fantastic. I will include a link to that as well in the show notes.
Great.
All right.
Awesome. Betsy, thank you so much for having me.
Of course. Have a great rest of your day.
Thanks. You too.
Bye. I'd like to thank my guest, Kristin Allaben from the Forte Factor. I will include all of the links and resources that we discussed during our conversation on my website, so be sure to check those out. And subscribe now so you won't miss an episode. Thanks for joining me today. This is your host, Betsy Jewell, with the High School Hamster Wheel Podcast.